When I was asked to say a few words today, I didn't exactly know what I needed to do. I didn't know exactly what they were looking for. But I knew that they wanted me to encourage people, especially the high school graduates, to continue their education. As he said, education is a very, very, very important part of my life. My parents were both in education. My mother was my principal in high school. My dad worked for the school board, and so anything less than an A was not acceptable. And my sister made it very hard. She had a 4.3 or some odd grade point average, so needless to say, when you bring home a 3.8, she has a 4.3, you're still not living up to the standard that they set. But what I was going to talk about was, we all know that we've been called to press towards the high calling, as we read in Philippians 3:14. But how do we do that? How do we go about achieving this high calling? And just as he said, it's not only through our Christian development, which we all desperately need, but we also desperately need to understand, because as we'll see later, that it opens doors that would not otherwise be open. And you may be asking yourself, well, why is he just blabbering around up here? But I think that achieving the high calling that we've been all called to do also could have to do with achieving a higher education. Right. As you can see, we have many different diverse levels of income, education levels, socioeconomic backgrounds, just like Jesus did with his disciples. Jesus' disciples came from all kinds of different backgrounds. They weren't all just very educated. They weren't all just not educated. They all did. Some of them had on-the-job training, just like the fishermen and the tent makers. And others were doctors and tax collectors and accountants. Some were speakers, writers, and then other avenues of employment, which we don't exactly know. But Matthew himself, he was a tax collector. And I believe that his background in mathematics would substantiate the fact that it influenced his ministry. Just like every job that you have, every place that you go in your life is going to influence how and who you can impact and minister. And that's what we have to understand. Just because you start out somewhere, as Jim Valvano, a great basketball coach and speaker, once said, and cancer advocate, he said that there are three things that we should do every day. Number one is to laugh. You should laugh every day. Number two is to think. You should engage yourself in deep thought every day. And number three, you should have your emotions moved to tears every day. For me, it's easy to do that. But this man said this while he was dying of cancer. He lived 2 weeks after he made this address. And it was one of the most moving speeches I've ever heard. It was given while he was receiving the Arthur Ashe Achievement Award for Humanity, given by the SB company with the SBM. But this man not only achieved things where the world would see him as inspirational, uplifting, or motivating, and successful, as we talked about in our class today, how we define success. But we also know that there was much more to this man. He also said that there are things that you must think about and should think about every day. And these things are where you are, where you started, where you are, and where you're going to be. By thinking on these things, you can set a blueprint for your life and for success within your life. And I think that Jesus Christ had a plan in mind when he picked his disciples. Matthew, again, being a tax collector and an accountant, he was more chronological in the way he presented information. And therefore, he was able to minister to people who liked things in exact chronological order through his ministry. Luke, he was a doctor. He was more descriptive in detailing the events of things that happened in his life. And so therefore he was able to minister and meet the needs of people who looked for that detailed description of different accounts throughout Jesus' ministry. Whereas other disciples painted with a much broader stroke. such as Mark and John, they weren't as specific. They took a much broader and much more liberty in detailing everything and not focusing on specific details necessarily. But the two that I think have had the greatest impact on the most amount of people was Peter and was Paul. And Paul was a disciple after Jesus, but Peter was a trained fisherman, and so he had a lot of time to think. This man was a very deep philosophy-based person, I believe, because whenever you look at some of the things that he did, especially the questions he asked to Jesus that none of the other disciples presented, just like he was the one that concluded that it was the Holy Spirit at work in Jerusalem, none of the others. He was the one who asked the hard questions to Jesus as to who would be greater in the kingdom. He was the one who questioned Jesus' washing of his feet at the Last Supper as to whether or not he was worthy. And he was the one who asked the Lord to allow him to walk on water. None of the other disciples, as Brother Dennis told us yesterday morning, every other disciple had the opportunity to step out of the boat, but none of them did. Right. But Peter did. He wanted to go further. He wanted to do more. And so God, therefore, he said these immortal words. He said, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give unto thee the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever thou bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." And Peter was able to speak in avenues that he would have never been able to speak in if he didn't have this perceived wisdom and knowledge. Just like when you go out of this place and whatever you pursue in your life, especially the younger ones who have a chance to pattern your life from this point forward, you have so many things and so many opportunities that are going to come your way. And if you take advantage of those opportunities, if you hold on to them, if you learn from every experience, just like what Martin said, learn from your parents. I know it sounds cliche, but they do honestly want what's best for you. If you learn from your teachers and from the people who are trying to educate you, it will open doors as you go forward. And Jesus also said that thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, all thy soul, and all thy mind. And this is the first and greatest commandment. So how do we love God with our mind? I believe it's just like, he stole one of my scriptures, but it's just like what Solomon said. By developing it, by growing it, by achieving the best possible outcome for yourself. Now, is everybody going to be an A student? No, but everybody can do their very best. Is everybody going to be a doctor? No, but everybody can do the very best that God gave them ability to be. And not only do you do that, but you've also been given talents and abilities. You've also been given things that are specific to you. There's experiences that you've been through that make you the perfect person to witness to somebody who comes through those doors. Right. Yes. There are places that you go on your job that make you the perfect person to witness to somebody that goes through those doors. Because I don't have the experiences that you do necessarily, and you don't have the same ones that I do. And therefore we need the diversity. We need every one of you. And that's why we're the body. We all collectively make up the body. Education, like I said, opened the doors, it created the opportunities, and it broke down the barriers that allowed them to reach their world. They were able to talk to dignitaries, they were able to talk to religious leaders, they were able to influence nations and change the outcomes and the cultures that they found themselves in. And if you remember this thing, that you live to worship and not to work. That was one of the hardest things for me to get. Because I always looked at it and I said that if I do the very best I can out there, then God understands. And He doesn't. I mean, needless to say, He doesn't. When you come through those doors, you come through with a purpose. You don't come through here just vaguely and lackadaisically going through the motions. You have a purpose in mind when you come into this place. If you have a need in your life, strive to have that need met before you leave. Don't sit there and say, well, You know, today just wasn't my day. Maybe it's your day.